Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon as we talk about the 2017 Organizational Standards Snapshot. My name is Kate Kajowski with NASCSP. I go over a couple housekeeping things before I turn this over to OCS to provide you with the presentation for this afternoon. So we've got everybody on mute right now. So if you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A or chat boxes on the right-hand side of your screen. We will go through all the questions at the end of the webinar and unmute everyone to see if there's any additional questions or conversation that you would like to have. So I will now turn it over to Seth Hassett from OCS.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining this. Well, thank you to NASCSP for helping convene today to share an update on the organizational standards and the information that we receive from state G offices in our report. And we are going to be talking today about both the results of what we found and how you will be receiving or have received state-specific snapshots, and then what we recommend that you do with that information as a follow-up, and how we can work together. So, the next slide. And just a minute, we're kind of getting our, we're just getting things going a little bit on the screen sharing. We're going to review the findings from the two reports, and as I said, provide some guidance on how that information. We can go to the next slide. Renita Carr has been working with me and a team of staff here in the Division of Community Assistance to pull information from the annual report. And I'm going to ask her to walk through and just to provide a little bit of background and reminder of where this information came from, so that will help in terms of understanding how it's presented back to you.
Sure, thanks, Seth. So the information that we will be sharing today came from the fiscal year 2017 CSG annual report. And that period was covered from October 1st, 2016 through December 30th, 2017. Now, this is the report that OCS received this year, and the report was due to us on March 31st in the OLDC system. So, this is what the states reported to us in terms of the organizational standards, and this is from Section D in the annual report. So this is where we're getting our information from. And this is the information that we collected or you all shared with us. So the information that we're sharing today is nothing that we came up with. It's just information that we received from the state, and we're sharing with you findings from that. And the section is Section D2. This is the organizational standards on performance, and this section outlines the percentage of eligible entities that each met all 90%, 80%, or 70% of the org standards, or as it is broken down in the system, all 90 to 90, 89 to 80, 49 to 70%. And the second section that we'll be reporting on today is the organizational standards that look at the different categories. And this is reported to us by you all, and so we're sharing the findings with back to you. And this section outlines the percent of eligible entities that standards by the different categories, or the standards by the different categories, and we see that there are 9 of them: consumer input and involvement, community engagement, community assessment, and so on and so forth.
Okay, thanks, Renika. And so, will recall that we provided a snapshot document, two different looks at the information from last year, both basically comparing, giving information on what the state's reported result was and how it compared to the national reported results. What's new this year is that now we have 2 years worth of information to compare, and so the capacity to look from one to the next, and also still have the ability to compare state and national data for both years. So first, we're going to just share with you the results on a nationwide basis and provide the update there. So the great news is we've made significant strides in terms of our nationwide number of entities that meet the ORG standards. And we can start with the look at the chart that says this is last year's results. And as we saw, we presented that 20% of the entities met all of the organizational standards last year. As you see, the escalating numbers. Again, what we did was we took the combined results. So we found that 53% of entities met at least 90% of the standards last year. And as you saw, escalating up to about 2% of the agencies that met at least 70% of the org standards. So the result this year on the reports from states is that we've seen progress across the board, and a percentage in terms of overall increase in terms of the number that met all of the standards. We're now at 42% reported. At the far end of it, we have 91% of our eligible entities, as reported by states, are meeting at least 70% of the org standards. And so, again, go to the next slide, and we can sort of see, there was a significant increase. Again, you expect the increase to compound, but there's an average of about 18.5% increase at each level, each of these levels. We'll go to slide. Another, can look at this from last year compared to this year in terms of the categories, and we'll hold here for a moment. So last year we had, you can sort of see the overall results had more variation. We certainly had organizational leadership. That was the category in which the lowest number of entities met all of the standards, 48%. And the highest that we had was 75% of our eligible entities reported to meet all organizational standards related to community engagement. So here we can sort of see the result as you reported. And again, you would expect to see this, but would duplicate what we've seen in the overall standards that we have cases in every category. We'll look at this in a moment, but the biggest increases are in the areas that we had the most room for improvement. So like organizational leadership and strategic planning, we saw big increases. And again, the more of these we meet, the more, we're not going to expect the big increases each year. We're going to start, it's going to get harder. But this is really good, encouraging news, and it shows that roots are taking place both in terms of the state leadership and in terms of the agencies themselves, working hard to document and have a system to meet these standards. So to see again, the next slide will show this area. You sort of see again more variation that the big increases were in those areas that had, as I said, the most room for improvement, organizational leadership, strategic planning, but across the board, everything, there's an average of about 13% more entities, reported, or 13% increase, and so we're very pleased to see that things are trending in the right direction. So now what we do is move to the next slide. We're going to talk, and Ronika is going to share what is happening in terms of sharing with each state an organizational snapshot. And again, that process is underway today and tomorrow. I mean, yesterday and today.
So here, we had 2 years worth of data that we mentioned before. So we were able to do a little bit more with it than we were able to do last year when just 1 year's worth of data. So this year we were able to create 4 different snapshots, and this year numbers, we were able to compare state by state. So basically fiscal year by fiscal year 2016 compared to fiscal year 2017 in both the performance as well as the categorical level. But also we were able to compare the fiscal year 17 state versus national results numbers, and we were able to provide that to the state. OCS yesterday and today, so I believe every single state as well as Puerto Rico should have received, and these are the state CSBG program contacts or officials, should have received an email from OCS with a letter from Seth that basically describes the snapshots for this year, and attached to that email were, the email included 4 snapshots. So if you've not received an email from us, please email CSBG States, or please reach out to your program specialist to let us know. And we will be happy to reach out to you and to just check to see what's going on. So now talk about, describe in more detail the 4 snapshots that you all are receiving or have received. So the first snapshot that we have here, and these are samples, so this does not include any state-specific information, but the design, the color, the content is what you should have received from us. And the first snapshot looks like the org standards, state fiscal year 16 to state fiscal year 17 basis, and we just, shared with you the number of eligible entities, percentage of that, as well as the percentage withstood from last year and this year's annual report on all standards met, at least 90% of the standards met, at least 80% of standards met, and at least 70% of the standards met. And we're able to know the information that you're looking at. The shot is very similar. It's on performance, but this one compares your state fiscal year 17 results to national fiscal year 2017 results. Again, this is exactly what you should have received with your state's information. The third shot now looks at information at the categorical level, and this is for your state's fiscal year 16 as well as fiscal year 17. And this sample basically shows, again, the 9 different levels of consumer involvement, and so on and so forth. And then the last one is your, from the categorical level, is your state versus the national numbers. Now, again, every one of you, all of the states did receive information. OCS has sent out emails yesterday again and today. And if you have not received this document, these documents, please let us know.
Thank you much, Monica. Now, so, and I'll just say there's behind that work to get each state a specific snapshot. There's been a tremendous amount of team effort that took place here in OCS, particularly Bernice Carr and Letitia Harley and Tony Velasco, who is here on a assignment to our office, all of whom, this required sort of a query of all the data. It required a first level analysis to get those national results. There are cases where we had anomalies or issues where the data in some states we needed to clarify an item or follow up to make sure the presentation was accurate. And then we went through using all these tables and create an individual look for each state. And of course, in the government, we want to make everything 508 compliant, meaning that it can be, with a reader for those with visual disabilities, et cetera. So the point being, we worked hard to pull this together. With that said, what we want to do is talk about how we can use this information, what we recommend. We're going to be sharing this as well with the state state action associations in the states. We want you to see it first, to have a chance to reflect on it. And let's go to the first point here. The thing I'm going to start with saying is that even despite all the work that I just described, the results are still preliminary. There's provide this. There's things that we get a correction. In fact, if you get this information and you see something that you want to ensure is corrected, please let us know, and we will move to adjust that. If there's any adjustments in one state, it does have an impact on the national result, although typically it's not a major thing if it's one or two entities or a little change. And as I said, we went through an exercise to reach to states where we saw something that looked like it needed clarification before we put this together. But OCS will continue to work with states to clarify data and working to ensure that there is as much consistency as possible in the application of these standards. And things can change. It's all subject to change. Because next slide, and just first I want to just encourage that in your states, you have access to more information than we do with regard to the organizational standards. We, as Renee shared, we get a report that kind of gives these categories, 80, 90, 70%, the broad categories. We don't have all the results for every standard in your state. And we encourage you to take a look under the surface in the information. And things like, for example, you may find that there's, in a particular category, whether it's organizational leadership or data collection, that there's a particular standard that a lot of people, a lot of entities seem to be struggling to meet. So you have a kind of a high-level picture in terms of the categories, but we encourage you to look under the surface and see where the priorities might be. What are the pain points, or what seems to be particularly difficult for some agencies, and that can be useful in identifying priorities for technical assistance and improvement across the state. So, your analysis can include looking at specific standards that need improvement, looking for patterns among multiple entities, or again, identifying ways that you might be able to get several organizations once and work with them in a targeted effort, either in a broad category on a particular standard or in some other way. So the next point is that we urge you to support the eligible entities in these continuous improvement efforts. We're really, this is that the fact that we've had 2 rounds of data and we are seeing demonstrated results, improvement in terms of meeting these standards, in a way we hope is going to be a reinforcing cycle. It's going to set the stage and show that we can meet these standards, that that there are state is doing this in a slightly different way, but for agencies, they now know kind of what the state's process is and what the state's required documentation is. So we encourage you to work with each entity to set targets for improvement and create technical assistance plans to support those improvements. What I really want to also highlight is I think it would be really great to look at agencies, especially that are under that 70% threshold. We have, we are now at 91% of our communication agencies meeting at, the large majority are meeting at least 70% of the org standards. So the remaining agencies that are below that, the 9%, that's, less than by rough math, 100 agencies out there. And within your state, those would be a great place to focus in terms of the minimum of trying to get them over that threshold, and setting some targets so that perhaps next year we can have that all of the entities are getting at least to 70%. So targets for improvement, create technical assistance plans to support those improvements. And then point 4 being that there's national and regional technical assistance available. And we're encouraging everyone, states and eligible entities, to use the available TA resources and to work with your national and regional TA partners and your state associations to identify priorities. And so some of the organizations that can be involved, Community Action Partnership has an Org Standards Center of Excellence, and we're sharing some of the information that we have used in this analysis with them so that they can also help in reaching out, advertising where the TA, national TA should focus. NASCSP and the CSPG Data Technical Assistance Center are a critical resource for you, both in terms of analyzing the data and then looking at goals to meet specific standards. The ARPICs, or the Art Regional Performance and Innovation Consortia, and especially the state association in your state, are really important resources. We think that when we put out the requirement that the ARPICs develop state-specific technical assistance plans in the last years, one of the ideas here was that we have them as critical partners in helping agencies meet the standards, and that this snapshot helps really give them a picture of where things stand in comparison to last year and in terms of the national approach. So, and then CAP law, and CAP law is especially valuable when it comes to things about rulemaking and kinds of other, kind of how the standards get into, a larger framework in terms of both the state's authority to establish the standards and to integrate them as part of the oversight of the effort. So those are all partners that we think can be a critical part of this effort. And again, I just want to say thank you to everybody for all the work that's gone into getting us to this place. We can go to the next slide in terms of questions. And what we'll do is, I think we're going to ask NASCSP was going to facilitate a Q&A discussion. So do you want to, I don't know, Katie or Muska will be facilitating that, but I will just ask them to, if we're looking, we'll ask them to facilitate that.
Well, just a reminder again, folks, that if you do have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat bar or the Q&A box located on the right. We received one question so far, and the question is, how will OCS work with states to clarify data when a review of the Center of Excellence standards may be warranted for clarification?
So I guess the first thing I say is if you have any questions or feedback with regard to your snapshot or the information there, I would suggest you send that to both to your assigned program analyst and copy it to the CSPG states and outline what the question is and what any issues or concerns. We will then take note and arrange a time to follow up with you and have a discussion. It depends on whether the question is clarifying that you received in your snapshot, or if it's more about or a process question with regard to the follow-up. As I said, is to understanding like standard. That's information that the states will have that we wouldn't have.
So let me mute the person who asked this question because she has a follow-up to this.
Sure, and that's where I think what would probably be, we want to answer
Yes. Okay, so Massachusetts, you are unmuted right now.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Seth. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you. The question in general, because both ourselves and our state association have had some questions around, or have had some discussions, I should say, around some of the organizational standards and the clarity maybe being re-reviewed to make it a little bit better, because I think it's sometimes it's left to interpretation. A good case in point would be that I know that there's an organizational standard that talks about the needs assessment every 3 years with a strategic planning every 5 years, but I believe Community Action Partnership in some of their webinars and overviews have been really saying that the two really have to go hand in hand. And that type of thing should really be clarified in terms of, because how do you get the strategic plan without really having your needs assessment and vice versa. So some of the standards that they've been in effect for a couple of years could use another kind of pass-through. And it's something that I know has been brought up at our conference, and it certainly has been brought up within our own network. And that's where I think sometimes when it comes to whether or not how a state is viewing a standard, and it may not match up to the national, it makes it like apples to oranges versus apples to apples.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dee. That helps. I understand better what you're asking in terms of so let's just sort of talk about that. So part of what I'm hearing is like some of the operational details behind a standard, and that may be a question or different ways of interpreting it in one place or another, or there may be some disagreements on that. So I think it would be valuable, and we will raise this and have discussions with the Org Standards Center of Excellence in terms of the tools. The thing within a state, you have a certain, if there are things, you have a certain operational latitude to implement and create your own process system in terms of the documentation. And the most important thing is to be consistent within your state, certainly. I recognize, and we recognize it, that part of the way this was put forward was there was a set of org standards developed in consultation with the network, with a series of listening sessions, rounds of opportunities for comment, and put out in the field. Now we have 2 years of work with this, and there may be places within it where we found that, okay, now there are questions or particular standards that, have been more contentious or more sticking points.
Correct.
We will consult with the, particularly with the Org Standards Center of Excellence, and that's what we'll look at in terms of our plan looking at next year. This is that particular cooperative agreement is a 3-year agreement. It'll be in its 3rd year. We've just continued, and that is an important thing to now take stock of in terms of where are those issues. And I would emphasize that the first, what I've shared, which is it's first most important that if the state is consistent within the state, that everybody in that state is being held and according to the same process and standard. Why is it important to look at the state national? Now, I think it's as a nationwide network, our goal is to make progress, and ultimately have continuous improvement toward meeting all these standards. That also means that we want to make sure that we are norming in some respects, that people are getting a sense of how do my results compare to what's happening. And I know that in some states, then folks that have said, look, feeling stricter than another state, or they have a little different, tighter way of approaching this in another state. My thought on this is that, again, now they've had 2 years of work on this, with eligible entities know what the states, or should know what the state's criteria process has been. And so, if they're achievable, and again, that within all these states there are agencies that are meeting all the standards, then the first goal is keeping toward meeting the standards as established and communicated and according to the criteria that the states have communicated. But I think we will do some, this is a good time in the process to do some review in terms of the upcoming year and some sorts of, listening processes. My kind of take on this is it would be, we really, if there, I don't take lightly making changes, because again, if we change it for one state, it becomes everybody has to adapt. So we would want to have a good process for doing that and hearing. So I think what we'll do is we will be talking with the Org Standards Center of Excellence in terms of kind of what the input process for this upcoming year to hear what those challenges have been. And please, just the expectation is we're not going to, we would not make changes without a timely process in which everyone which we had at least an opportunity for input from across the country. But thank you for the question, Lisa.
Great. So seeing as to how there are no more questions in the chat box, I'm going to open the floor up and unmute everybody in case there are some folks that would prefer to ask the question verbally. So all folks should be unmuted right now. If anybody has a question, please feel free to ask.
I guess.
Well, yeah, I think yeah, we didn't have any. I think that say if you do have questions that either you come up after you get off the call, or you're looking at your snapshot, or something that you really didn't feel like asking in front of all the other colleagues, that I would just encourage you to do that share, which is send it to your analyst here at OCS, your assigned program analyst, copy that CSPG state's address. The who are here, Ronika and Tony, we're going to be kind of working to follow up on that as needed. So we do want to make sure that if there are things you later think of that we're here to answer those. My guess, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, so and it's Friday, so maybe people are also, and hopefully they got the information they needed. But
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And as Seth said, please feel free to reach out to any of us with questions, and have a great weekend.
yeah, thank you, everybody.